Vice President of Development for Virtualability. I design and maintain the virtualability environments, help create new opportunities, and work on many of the virtualability grants. If anyone needs assistance during the conference today, please IM one of the VAI greeters who are standing in the aisles toward the back of the auditorium. If you're not familiar with our virtualability community, please click on the poster on the stage to receive a note card, or check out our website at virtualability.org. To find out more about this conference or to comment on the presentations, please look at the information here, blog.virtualability.org. We have a busy sim today, so if you could remove any scripted items, including face lines or HUDs, we would really appreciate it. Also, Metaverse TV is filming this conference. If you do not want the back of your head in the film, please move to the back row of the auditorium. Metaverse TV is streaming live at www.livestream.com/MetaverseTVBusiness. For maximum accessibility today, Virtualability offers our presentations simultaneously in both text and voice. It helps people who are hearing impaired or deaf, who are multitasking while they're at the Disney World, or whose first language is not English, to help participate fully and in real time. The presenter will be doing both text and voice today. For the question and answer part of the presentation, our transcriptionist will be doing meaning for meaning transcribing, not word for word. The title of this opening keynote session today is Play to the Strengths, Accessible Fun and Learning for All Children. Children learn by playing, whether they have a disability or not. It's important to ensure that children with disabilities can play in ways similar to their non-disabled peers. It's a responsibility of their parents, caregivers, and teachers to create an environment that enables and encourages this play. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce a fellow Texan. Our presenter is Dr. Leticia De León, an associate professor at the University of Texas Pan America in Edinburg, Texas. She instructs college students who plan to work as early childhood, bilingual, and special education elementary teachers. Dr. De León teaches courses in child development and teaching methods for social studies and language arts for elementary teachers. She has used Second Life with problem-based scenarios to reinforce child development concepts. Dr. De León will present today in both voice and text. We'd like to request that you hold your questions and comments for Dr. De León until she has finished presenting. Please type the word question before your question so it's easier to find in our chat stream. Dr. De León, welcome to Virtualability. Please begin.
Hello everyone, and thank you for coming. Gentle and Nice Guy and all the organizers of the International Disability Rights Affirmation Conference have given me a great honor. They have transformed what I thought would be a humble contribution to the accessibility knowledge base into a keynote address. Perhaps had I not felt as passionately as I do about my topic, I may have approached this situation with tremendous trepidation. As it is, I'm actually rather excited that I can be part of this conference. Okay, let's begin. My presentation today is titled Play to the Strengths, Accessible Fun and Learning for All Children. Play is commonly misunderstood and underestimated. Some of you here today may even wonder why the opening session of a disability rights conference is on play, when there are more profound and serious issues about access that will be explored over the course of today and tomorrow. I would argue, however, that accessibility begins at play, and that at no other time during childhood do we disable our children as when we limit their opportunities to play. That's a rather bold claim, I know, but I hope that by the end of my presentation, I will have explained why I feel this way. I will begin with a fundamental and unequivocal rights declaration set the proper tone to this presentation. As you can see in this slide, the rights of a child, any child, to play have been declared worldwide by the foremost leading organization on human rights, the United Nations. Section 5 specifically addresses children with special needs, and it states, "The child who is physically, mentally, or socially handicapped shall be given the special treatment, education, and care required by his particular condition." Section 7 of the Declaration of the Rights of the Child addresses education as free and compulsory for all elementary school children, but it is later in this same section that they also address the specific rights of children to play. The relevant section states the following: "The child shall have full opportunity for play and recreation, which should be directed to the same purposes as education. Society and the public authorities shall endeavor to promote the enjoyment of this right." Given that the UN declares play a human right, I will purport to explain why and how these rights may be beneficial and applicable for all children. So why play? Research shows that when children engage in different types of play, they also develop important milestones in the cognitive, social, emotional, and physical domains, which I will describe later in this presentation. The overall reason for this is that play has just the right conditions that nurture growth and development in all those areas. Play removes limitations, encourages discovery, and is intrinsically motivating. Regardless of a child's ability, all children are capable of playing. Parents, caregivers, and educators should capitalize on the natural elements of play to help minimize developmental delays that may occur due to the disability. It is because of these reasons that play should never be optional. Before we get much farther along, however, I want to take a moment to define what I mean by play. In the context of this presentation, play is defined as having certain clear characteristics. These characteristics are applicable across all kinds of play situations in which children can participate. In order for an activity to be considered play, it needs to have no intrinsic goal or prescribed learning. Children engage because they want to and not because they might learn something. Play should also be spontaneous and voluntary. Play rarely has a plan and tends to develop in the moment. Play is the epitome of active engagement. Active means hands-on and minds-on to the moment. Attention is fixed. Obviously, play is also pleasurable and enjoyable. Essentially, it's fun to do. Play also has no reality constraints. A child can be in a castle in outer space or be 10 feet tall. the immediate environment, while it may provide a catalyst for imagination, does not hold the child bound to it. Finally, play fulfills needs that are almost visceral. Children need to laugh, need to engage, need to wonder, need to feel free and alive and safe. Play fulfills those needs. The influences of play on cognitive development have been cited in numerous child development textbooks and studies that examine play interactions and its subsequent effects. Generally speaking, the list of influences mentioned here are a compilation of various sources. First, play encourages purposeful attention and remembering. Because play is interesting and engaging, a child will sustain attention far longer than what is typical of his age. The short attention span goes right out the developmental window. Second, play helps children develop self-regulation. Children who typically don't know how to follow rules will follow their own when engaged in play. Whatever the game, whatever the pretend scenario, there are implicit rules to its engagement that a child will be able to follow in order to keep the fun going. It gives them the willpower they wouldn't normally have in other learning situations that have rules and guidelines associated with them. Third, play helps children develop a symbolic function. Some call it a separation of thought from actions and objects. Thought becomes abstract and children can see beyond the realism to extend imagination. These are higher order forms of cognitive functions that become exceedingly important for creativity and scientific processing. Fourth, play impacts motivation. Within the child's play world, he or she will develop goals which give actions intention. Goal-oriented behavior is the hallmark of cognitive organization and categorization when processing information. Fifth, play facilitates decentration. Essentially, it allows children to become less egocentric, to decenter perspectives from themselves to others. Finally, play influences language development. Children engaged in play communicate with each other and begin to recognize that they must find ways to be understood and negotiate the play environment. Every child has a language, regardless of the mode of expression, is through sound utterances or physical expression. Therefore, when I mention language development, I want you to consider the larger communication aspects of it. I don't use language in a restrictive way. So yes, children develop language, whatever their language may be, through play. Play also influences social-emotional development as indicated here. First, play allows for emotional regulation. This means children are able to control their emotions even when something doesn't go their way, in order to reach the larger catharsis that play offers. Second, because of the social context of play, children learn that certain actions gain them friendships while others do not. They learn to negotiate social situations so that they develop connections with others. Third, play allows them to learn how to cooperate. Essentially, they have to play nice with the other kids. Where children typically would not know how to help each other, they will set aside differences, ignore barriers, and cooperate so that the play event can be more fulfilling. Fourth, play develops empathy, which is a much more desirable social-emotional development than sympathy. Playing with others allows them to understand each other's motivations and be more sensitive to them. Fifth, play allows children to understand important social cues. In play situations, children must take turns, must negotiate, and learn to understand each other. Development must follow that children should become socially competent. While our educational systems emphasize cognitive development, it is the social-emotional ones that most influence a child's world. Let's take a moment to talk about children with disabilities and what influences their development. As an educator, I have been very much immersed in the teachings of Vygotsky and Piaget, the former a social-cultural scientist and the latter a cognitive scientist. Vygotsky, however, is one that also worked with children with disabilities, primarily the visually and hearing impaired. He considered those disabilities, including those that limit mobility, as primary disabilities, and that these affected only lower mental functions. This is to say that children with disabilities had the same potential for higher order thinking or cognitive and social emotional processing as children who did not have disabilities. In other words, all the cognitive and social emotional functions that I just described are within the reach of children with disabilities that affect mobility, vision, hearing, and social competence, like autistic spectrum disorders. However, and this is a big however, children denied access to appropriate education, intervention, and rich experiences due to a primary disability could develop a secondary disability. It is this secondary disability that most profoundly affects children's development because it targets higher mental functions, like the ones previously mentioned. This means that children who develop a secondary disability may develop cognitive and social-emotional developmental delays due to a lack of access to alternative tools. It is an absolute tragedy that children who are eminently capable are further disabled by ignorant practices, lack of access to special tools, and learning situations. Let's talk further about play and how secondary disabilities emerge within that context. In social play settings, children with disabilities have challenges that other children don't tend to have, mostly caused by the secondary disabilities that develop as a result of the primary disability. Disabilities that most commonly present these challenges for children in social play settings are those dealing with communication difficulties. These include children with hearing and visual impairments, autistic spectrum disorders, and behavioral disorders like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Children with these types of disabilities have difficulty gaining the attention of other peers in play situations because they communicate differently. As a result, they also have difficulty initiating interactions with other children or even responding to them in ways commonly acceptable. If they are able to gain attention, initiate, or respond, they still need to be able to sustain the interaction, and they are not always successful at this either. Important components of play is shifting focus in an interaction. A play situation changes in an instant because it is spontaneous, and children with communication difficulties may not be quick to react. Even ending an interaction may seem an awkward exercise for children with disabilities. They are typically abrupt rather than natural. However, despite how bleak these challenges seem to be, they are not. Knowing about them is half the battle. Children have two essential social-emotional needs: to be loved and to be accepted. Play is the only social context in which children should never have to doubt that they are both loved and accepted. Yet children with disabilities enter play situations with that very doubt in their minds. And if children can't play, can't find the joy, the abandon of it for its own sake, what then will become of them? I know I oversimplify and perhaps even overdramatize a bit, but play to children is as essential as breathing is to humanity. Therefore, access to play isn't just about providing an opportunity and a place. It is about empathy and acceptance. I'd really like to be able to break into song and repeat the words of the Beatles. All you need is love. Fundamentally, access to play really is about love. In practical terms, though, sometimes love needs a little training. The image before you shows what inclusive play environments need in order to provide access to all children. They don't just happen. Putting children together is part of it, certainly, but the other part of it is teaching them how to be together and play together. Play establishes a reciprocal condition by which all parties benefit. If a child with a disability plays with a child who does not have a disability, both of them should come out of the experience pleased and happy. They both gain. First, however, these two children must learn to understand and accept each other. Therefore, let's talk more about inclusive play and getting children into a playground that supports it. I know that it seems like I've shifted my focus a bit from the issue of inclusion, but I'm really driving to a point here. Playgrounds are the opened up world. If one were to say that children have a domain, this would be it. However, not all playgrounds are created equal, and for children with disabilities, a playground may be just another place in which they cannot participate. This is why playgrounds that are accessible to all children do not just have to meet a certain design standard of accessibility. They must also come with an instruction manual. This is why I say that a playground could be the most perfectly accessible, wonderfully engaging location for all children, including those with disabilities, but it can still be a perfectly exclusive of certain children. Let's look at how it works. Yes, even children need to be taught how to play. While many life lessons and play situations are learned and created free of adult intervention, children always need a guided start. This is what is meant by intentional strategies. Play programs are those that offer training and events where children and adults of all abilities learn to play together right in the playground. This is done deliberately and intentionally. These play programs benefit both children with disabilities and children without disabilities alike. They do it by helping children understand each other's language and how they can play even when their modes of communication and mobility are different. Their general purpose is to help children develop empathy, social competence, and acceptance. If you will recall, these were essential components to ensuring that children with disabilities do not develop secondary disabilities that target higher mental functions. Two such program examples are Shane's Inspiration and To Play Together. I provide you with their website information and the resources I will give out at the end of my presentation. Most commonly named playgrounds are the ones specifically called inclusive playgrounds. The name itself implies a set of guidelines for its design and implementation. Essentially, inclusive playgrounds hold the philosophy that children of multiple abilities can play together, not just alongside each other. They are meant to engage. Their design principles come from Me Too, which is a creation of PlayCore classrooms, and they follow 7 principles. Be fair, be included, be smart, be independent, be safe, be active, be comfortable. The next slide will show you a sample playground with the 7 design features. This playground indicates Me Too design principles utilized toward its design. The playground is in Harrisburg, Virginia. The first principle of design in this playground is Be Fair. It has unique entryways with colors and designs embedded into services along with accessible travel routes. The second principle of design is Be Included. This design has ground-level activities as well as interactive areas that engage all the senses and promote communication and social interaction. The third design principle is Be Smart. This playground contains discovery areas like talk tubes, music panels, and dramatic play areas. The fourth design principle is Be Independent. In this playground, this principle is applied with hands-on multi-sensory experiences of sound, touch, movement, and visual stimuli. The fifth element of design is Be Safe. In this playground, there are graduated levels of challenge, which also provide a sense of security. Children are also able to take risks safely. The sixth design element is Be Active. This playground has adaptive swing seats to maintain neutral body position. The seventh design element is Be Comfortable. This playground features balcony panels that allow children sitting or standing to reach the activity together and play side by side. Of course, to truly be appreciated, this playground would need to be explored. This one and others of its kind. In the resources, I will provide you with links that tell you where all these playgrounds are located. Admittedly, most of them are within the United States. That doesn't mean, however, that other countries don't also have inclusive playgrounds. Canada has a few, as well as Australia. India and Israel each have one as of 2012. You may have also heard of other types of playgrounds that address accessibility, and many are synonymous with inclusive playgrounds. The term accessible playground is intended to provide a broad, all-inclusive definition for any playground that is designed to be accessible to children with diverse abilities. The Universal Design Playground is an accessible playground that is sometimes synonymous with inclusive playground, as it has similar design principles. The ADA-compliant playgrounds meets minimum standards of accessibility as per federal guidelines set forth by the U.S. Access Board. As per the federal government, all playgrounds in U.S. communities needed to have been ADA compliant by 2012. This meant many existing playgrounds were altered rather than rebuilt. In many instances, an ADA compliant playground is accessible to children, but not all children can play in it, and it does not provide a design that engages all children at their different abilities. Boundless Playground, also described as an inclusive playground, but it is a registered trademark name of a company that makes them. They also certify playgrounds to give them a distinction and an assurance to the community that they are inclusive of all children. Thus far, Boundless Playgrounds just build playgrounds. They do not have a play program component. When Nice Guy told me the theme of this year's conference, I thought about what that meant for children and their need for play. Let Me In took in a much more profound meaning for play. Access in this case wasn't just about making doors wide enough, adding ramps, including braille, using sign language. It was about letting children engage as well. Any child can be brought into any playground and sit and observe from the sidelines. That's not access. Children engage when they play, and they are given true access when they can play with any child without being judged or made to feel embarrassed for their differences. Play should be an equalizer, a barrier destroyer, a means for children to understand each other and simply have fun and reap the rewards of childhood. Based on all that I have mentioned, here are some recommendations for parents and caregivers of children with disabilities. Play with the children under your care. As a primary giver of love, your role in the safety and security of the child is vital to their development of trust. However, parents or caregivers of children with disabilities must educate themselves. Play is not as intuitive for adults as it is for children, so you too need to learn how to play with children so that they play to their strengths, not to their disabilities. You are their first line of defense in their uncertain world. Children should begin to play as soon as they enter toddler age. It is a pivotal time in development, and it is when the brain develops most of the neurological connections that the child will use well into adulthood. At no other time in life will the brain essentially still be growing its potential. Maximize it. Children need opportunities for a structured and unstructured play. Structured play comes from adults, as they guide the child on how to play. Unstructured play is when a child is let loose in an environment that is both accessible, inclusive, and engageable. Children should play every day, even for 30 minutes. Some pediatricians recommend 30 minutes of structured play and 60 of unstructured play. However, leave some room for spontaneity. After all, play should be fun, and putting it on the clock sometimes diminishes that a bit. Inclusive playgrounds are liberating areas for children. They are not a classroom where children expect that they will need to learn something. And yet, it might be the most important classroom a child will ever have for learning life lessons. If you don't have an inclusive classroom near you, advocate for one. The resources I will provide you also include ways that parents and communities can bring inclusive playgrounds for their children. Your children need you to be an advocate for them. If not you, who? Five more precious words I cannot instill in you. Be the advocate children need. I thank you for your kind attention, and I will entertain questions at this point.
This is gentle. Thank you. I want to say thank you very much for your presentation. It was wonderful. Such important information. We need to remember that our children are our future, and we need to think about them as reflecting on our society as a whole. I see we've got some questions coming in, and our audience is definitely part of this session that we need to acknowledge, because your interaction is what's going to make this really a good follow through to all the information that Letty's given us. And I'm hoping you're going to post some comments on the blog entry for this session. I want to recognize iSky. She is the one who did all of the hard work behind the conference that you don't see. She was the organizer of the conference. She set up the slides. She helped the presenters learn to use the speakeasy if they didn't know how to do that already. And she really has done everything that makes this conference successful. Lady Slipper and her team of greeters are also part of this, the success of this. And I want to also acknowledge Dusa Dragonash and Metaverse TV. They are filming today's events. They are streaming this one live onto the internet, so our non-Second Life friends can see all the great things that we're doing in the world, and you can tell them to look at the stream at livestream.com /Metaverse TV Business. I think we have a question, Letty. If you read up, Sister had a question. You mentioned play programs. She works with teens and preteens who have not had inclusive play experiences and have not learned how to play. What recommendations would you offer for teens and preteens about play?
Actually, that really is a very sad truth. There are quite a few teens and preteens actually that were not exposed to the kinds of play situations that very young children need if they have disabilities. And my recommendations, of course, and this is something that's going to take time, truthfully, but even teenagers and preteens can learn how to play together. But essentially, it's really all about acceptance and empathy, because really when teenagers become when they get to that age, at that point, there are a lot of prejudices that have developed. Teens with disabilities sometimes get bullied, which is an unfortunate situation. But it's really about educating all the people also that are around them. So it is possible to have programs where you have the teenagers and preteens learn how to play together. And play for teenagers, of course, is different. That doesn't mean that, of course, they're going to go necessarily into pretend situations and things of that nature. But teens and preteens can also go into playgrounds. This actually reminds me of this program. It's intended for early childhood, but it also works wonders for older kids. It's called Roots of Empathy, and I give you the link in the resources. What it does essentially is it teaches children about empathy and about acceptance and about learning to talk to each other and to understand each other better. They essentially bring babies into a classroom, and children are supposed to understand them, which is, of course, as we all know, there's no being more helpless than a baby. And so when you bring in those types of situations for kids who don't understand how to see other perspectives, it really does open up their eyes a little bit to that. That's just one, of course, type of program that I've heard of. But really it's about that. It's about training kids to be more empathetic and to learn to understand each other. I hope I answered your question.
Now, Polaris has a question. What sort of events do you suggest to introduce people to these types of areas?
Actually, community events work best. Usually when you have, of course, the opening of a playground is probably the most wonderful way to expose people to these types of areas, to expose them to the playground itself. And not just an opening is saying, here we go, the playground's open, come in and play. It's about creating a program of play, so that when you open the playground, you also open it with a set of activities guided by experts that will show kids how to play with each other. So those are very, very important. There was as I was looking up some of this information, I came across this really wonderful event in the UK about play. They have a National Play Day, and they do all sorts of neat events for kids and for adults and for teenagers, for everyone. And their play program is specifically designed to have access to all children. So, those kinds of situations are the best way to introduce people to these types of areas, because otherwise, we live in our own world sometimes. We get caught up in our own daily grind that sometimes we don't see farther than that. And so people who don't have children with disabilities, they just don't think about it. And really it's up to us to make sure that they do think about it.
Okay, and Sister has another question. Can you say something about finding funding for playgrounds like you've described? She's in the U.S. There's a huge price tag associated with a playground like you showed us, one which most low-income communities like simply could not afford. So how can they find public funding for these kinds of playgrounds?
Actually, unfortunately, public funding is not really your way to go about this. Most of these playgrounds actually work off of community events. There's one particular playground that is listed on I'm not sure if it's the boundless classrooms or the inclusive ones, but it was funded by a Girl Scouts troop, believe it or not. They raised funds, they raised awareness, and they brought in this beautiful playground. So, unfortunately, when it comes to public funding, you're not going to get much help. However, you do want to try anyway, okay? And let me tell you how you can try. Most city budgets are done at the end of the year. So if you want them to consider bringing in a playground that's accessible to all children, you want to get into the city council, into the, you know, the meetings that the local politics have by November, because in November they start talking about their budgets. So, you know, if you're going to make an effort, make it then, because by January, by the beginning of the year, at that point they can't help you. So that's just a, you know, just a tip. If you want to try there, but mobilize your community resources, the nonprofit organizations. That you know, kids are wonderful fundraisers. So, you know, that's just a suggestion, and that's just one of the examples that I remember.
And Oronoki adds in that local politicians sometimes have discretionary funds that you might be able to access. Polaris has another question. Do you think corporate involvement is another avenue for funding?
Yes, actually, it is another avenue of funding. Corporate involvement is also, you know, a wonderful way to do it, and you also want to do it early enough, because corporations also decide what their donation, because they all have an allotted amount of money that they're willing to pay towards the community, and that includes your local grocery stores, businesses alike. They tend to also allot a certain amount of money that they're going to donate to such causes by a certain time. And I think they usually have fiscal years similar to the entire year. The only exception to that are academic institutions. Like, I come from an institution. Our fiscal year is, weirdly enough, around the academic semester. So, you know, our fiscal plans actually happen like in July. So find out when their fiscal years end and when they have these discussions about budgets, and you can certainly also promote their participation in this.
And I have a question. I see from what you're saying that play is really important for child development, but it seems to have very little to do with schooling. Is that a problem? Should there be play embedded in school curricula?
Actually, it is a problem, and it's not. That's actually a really good question, Jenna. Many early childhood programs actually do have play programs. They encourage you know, participation in pretend play and symbolic situations. Their classrooms are set up so that children can play with each other. Unfortunately, they're usually not built around accessibility measures, but they do have play programs. So, in fact, they're really wonderful about teaching structured play, which is one of the things that I mentioned as recommendations. So you want to make sure that the schools also know about this as well. Most of them do, actually. However, the structured play and the opportunities for play have diminished. So on the no part of this, because of accountability testings, most schools have gotten rid of recess time. They've gotten rid of physical education programs, which is absolutely tragic, because they feel that test prep is more important than play, which is absolutely horrible. And of course, I speak only from the perspective of my state. I know that you know, Emma mentioned that she's from Texas also, and that's just the reality we live with here. Test prep has basically killed enjoyment for our children, and it's really, really horrible and sad.
Okay, and Arlo is asking, is multi-generational play also important? For example, foster grandparent programs, play with adults with developmental disabilities, etc.
Oh gosh, yes, multi-generational play is wonderful, actually, because there's a two-way street also. Remember what I mentioned in my presentation, that children who interact with each other, you know, they gain with it. Well, so do adults, you see, because especially with, you know, when adults are also, you know, just kind of so concerned, so stressed by daily life, and especially if, of course, you have parents or caregivers or even grandparents. Some grandparents do take care of children with disabilities. When you have children like that, sometimes it is very stressful because you're worried about them and you're worried about what kind of access you can provide for them. And so playing together is another way to bring in also the enjoyment back into the adults as well. And plus, keep in mind that the adults are the ones that provide that security net, that safety net. So playing with them for children, especially for children that need to learn how to communicate with each other, or like hearing impairments, where they need to learn their own language first, it's very important that they play with adults, with their foster grandparents, with adults that, even in care, in daycares, those are important too.
Wow, these are great questions. Isaiah's asking, at what age do we stop utilizing play? I see adults continuing to play as a process to learn or be creative or get inspired even at work.
Yes, actually, play should actually never go away. But the formal definition of that is actually that in schools, or rather what psychologists tend to recommend, is that play officially goes away around let's say 10 years old, 10 or 12 years old, which is essentially when they enter the preteen years. That's when it goes away. But that's only a formal kind of definition of that. Play should never go away. Actually, I'm reminded by this quote that was talking about play, actually, and I'll share it right now. I cut it from the presentation originally because I didn't think it was relevant, but I'll mention it now. This person, basically, he was talking about how play is very, very important. He was saying that everybody should play. And it was really interesting what he said, that basically play is an important function of life. We do need to play, because otherwise the enjoyment of living goes away. So there's a lot to be said about play. And Ice-Guy mentioned something really interesting about creativity. Really, if you don't play, your creativity goes away. This is the same thing that I mentioned to my students. You can actually kill your ability to be creative if you don't use it. It's a skill just like anything else. Many people consider that that creativity is a gift, and really all children have the capability to be creative, but actually it goes away if it's not used. So a gift can be basically squandered. So it's a very important aspect of what Ice-Guy mentioned. And you're right, Lady Slipper, play does keep you young, and that's very, very important as well. That's awesome, Ice-Guy. I'm glad you play in Second Life. So do I. Yes, I love these comments. Sister, you're absolutely right. That would be neat. And attitude is important as well. I do want to mention that the resources that I have for you, I'll also have the entire transcript of today's presentation. You can already buy them from my little block here next to me. It wasn't active before, but you can already click on it, and you can find the additional resources as well as the references. So you're welcome to click on it, and you will receive the information that basically helped create this presentation.
I want to share another resource that I don't know if Letty knows about. There is a model accessible playground in Second Life. It was made by graduate students in occupational therapy who are from the Thomas Jefferson University. And you can see it there. It's on Edu Island.
Yes, actually, I am familiar with it, General. I've had my students, occasionally visit that playground as well. So yes, definitely. If you have not seen it, I agree with Gentle. I recommend that you go take a look at it. It's really well done.
And there's time between the sessions. There's a half hour between sessions, so that you're welcome to pop out and go look at the playground and then come back.
Gentle, thank you so much for having me today. All of you, thank you so much for your attention and for your wonderful questions. Thank you all so much. If there's other questions, I still have a couple more minutes. Well, a few more than a couple. I'll entertain any other questions. Otherwise, thank you so very much. I appreciate that. You do me great honor. Thank you.